So it's time for the appraisal. An appraiser is someone that's hired by the buyer, but essentially works for the lender to investigate the property and, most importantly, determine the value of the property as security for the loan that you're going to get that a buyer will get on this property. So if a bank is going to lend several $100,000, they want to make sure that if things go badly and you decide not to pay the mortgage, that there's an asset there that is worth $300,000. And depending on the loan and the amount of the down payment that particular loan requires, it would have to be really the value of the contract. So if you offered $300,000, but the loan is for $270,000, they want to know that the property is worth $300,000 and that their $270,000 would be safe if you defaulted on the loan. When an appraiser goes out to examine the property, they are going to do a cursory inspection. Certainly nothing as thorough as a home inspector is going to do, but they are going to look for the general condition of the property, and they're going to note any issues that they identify. If they clearly see that there's damage to the property, it's going to get identified. If they can clearly see evidence of dry rot, these things are going to get noted by the appraiser and reported back to the lender. And if the loan requires they be addressed, then it's going to have to be corrected before the lender will fund the loan. Now, the appraiser is going to generally make a fairly quick pass on their inspection on the property. They're likely to measure the dimensions and confirm the size, the square footage of the property, and they're going to check the condition of the property. The rest of what they do is to look for similar properties that they can compare that property to. The most important thing they're doing is determining the value of that property and if in fact that value would support that loan. So they're going to run comps, look at comparable properties to see if the value on other recently sold properties supports the offer amount and loan amount that you have for this property. So a report from an appraiser will usually show 3 primary comparable properties and begin to make adjustments up and down depending on what features and amenities this property has in contrast to another. So if your home, if the home the buyer is purchasing has a pool, but it's very similar to the one next door that sold several months ago that did not have a pool, they're going to make an adjustment for that. So the appraiser is going to take several properties, and oftentimes they'll include more, but at least 3 properties, and start making comparisons, financial comparisons, based on what one property has versus another, and ultimately say, this property is worth, in their estimation, this amount. Now, if a property does not appraise for the contract price, let's say you offered $400,000 on the property and the appraiser comes in at $390,000. There is a contingency, which we cover contingencies in another lesson, for you to escape the contract. If a property doesn't appraise for the contract price. Now, the appraiser is simply giving an opinion. Now, it's an educated opinion, so it's likely to be a very good opinion, but it's an opinion of value. But when you have a property that does not come in at contract value, there are a few things that can be done. The lender is going to object to the $10,000 difference. They're willing to lend on the appraised value. So if they're in an FHA loan willing to lend 96.5% on the appraised value, they're going to now calculate your loan based on that $390 value, which means there's a $10,000 gap. So what's the solution in that instance? Well, you're going to want to talk to your broker, but the likely solutions are, and the first one would be ask the seller to bring the price down to $390, which the seller may or may not do. You can actually, if you have the cash, come up with the cash and pay that difference. Lenders will allow that generally, or perhaps something in the middle. And that's something to be negotiated between you or between the buyer and the seller of a property.